Welcome to the Open Bedroom Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Kalo. Welcome to conversations about open relationships, online dating, and creating relationship dynamics that truly align for you. Don't be afraid to be the visionary for your family in this, because truthfully, I'm assuming a lot of women are going to be listening to this. I have noticed it's usually the women that are leading this conversation and this vision and holding it for your family. And don't be afraid to be the one to be the visionary and to be the leader in this. I have found that the men that I have divorced have been ecstatically happy to still be involved. And they just needed kind of like a little bit of a guide of like, what does that look like? Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast, and welcome back Wendy from Owning Your O. She is going to look familiar to you guys because we just recorded and published in June, Making ADHD Your Bitch with BDSM. Bam. That was kind of a complicated title, but it worked and we love it. So while I was recording with Wendy, I remember her saying, "Oh yeah, Jen, I consciously uncoupled with my husband, and not only that he lives here, and I'm polyamorous and have other partners." And I like, something happened where I bookmarked that in my mind, and I thought, I want to hear that story. I want to hear how Wendy and her ex and whatever partner she has right now, like, how are they creating a life that's really supporting their family? I think for a lot of us, we don't know how to create something different unless we see it from someone else. And so I want to give us an example today of what your life can look like when you break up, what your family dynamics can become if you choose to keep everybody together under the same roof. So Wendy, welcome back. If for people that don't know you, do you mind doing like a quick update and then we can launch right into this?
Okay, no problem. So, hi, I'm Wendy. I am an orgasm and neuro pleasure coach. And I'm sure you understand the orgasm part, but the neuro pleasure really is about I help people regulate their nervous system so they can experience more pleasure in their life. And that includes many different avenues. BDSM is one of them, but there's so many different ways to go about bringing pleasure into your life. Although orgasm is probably my favorite way. Um, as far as anything else that you want me to share, is that a good?
I mean, maybe like a family and relationship overview. So that'll set
Okay.
the stage for today's conversation.
All right. So I am a mom of two boys, and um I got married in 2008. I separated from my husband in 2017. So we were together for a good 9 years, before the separation happened. And as you said, we co-parent together. We live together and we co-parent together. Part of the separation, I say part, it's not the whole separation. Part of it was because I was unhappy being in a monogamous relationship.
Mhm.
I am bisexual and I like being with both men and women. And when you're in a monogamous relationship with either or, you don't get to experience both. So that was an element of it. That was like the sexual side of it versus the connection side of it. And I realized actually really early on that I was polyamorous. The first time I kind of have a memory of it, I was in sixth grade, and there were these different boys I was talking to and flirting with, and I mean, I didn't even know what flirting was at that time, but looking back, I can tell I was like flirting with them. I was just interested in them. I liked them all for very different reasons, and they all happened to ask me out within like the same week.
Ooh.
And I said yes to all of them because I liked them all. And then they found out about each other, got mad at me, and then all broke up with me, and I was alone.
So your
And
first attempt at polyamory as a young child probably wasn't your best way of handling things. I'm sure you've learned quite a
yes, I
bit in
learned
all
a
these
lot
years.
since then. But So actually, I think that experience kind of just showed me like you can't be with more than one person at the same time. You have to be monogamous. And
Mm,
so I had that mindset of you have to be monogamous because I also didn't see it anywhere, right? Like I don't like now you can start finding it a little bit
mhm.
more, but it definitely was not anywhere except for like in crazy cults or something, right? Like that was the only time like you would see it, right? Or also like in the Mormon religion where they would be able to take different wives, but it was also under
Right.
this like really confined, constricted lifestyle that wasn't what I was interested in either. So I definitely went the whole straight monogamy route, even
Mhm.
though I was bisexual. I didn't really pursue anything with women except for maybe getting drunk and hooking up and having some fun, crazy nights. A lot of that was the messaging that I got. Um, I heard this a long time ago and it stuck with me. You know how sometimes something resonates with you and not necessarily because it's true, it just
Mhm.
resonates with you because that's where you're at. And it was this saying that bisexual, like bisexual men are gay and bisexual women are hurt. And I was trigger warning sexually abused as a child.
Okay.
So I always felt broken and hurt and unworthy.
Mm.
And so I always always assumed that the reason why I was sexually, like had a proclivity towards sexual encounters or being with females was because of this experience.
Oh.
And it wasn't until much later that I learned, like, oh, other people are that and they didn't have abuse. Oh, maybe there's not something wrong with me. But it wasn't until I separated from my husband that I even discovered that. So, like, we're talking just within the last 6 years where I even can openly say that I'm bisexual, right? So, obviously, I got into a marriage that was around a certain paradigm
Mhm.
and where I was being hidden. So, I just want to give a little perspective because sometimes, everyone has their different situations and like
Mhm.
the reasons why you separate from people can be like a big, huge thing, or it could be something that to someone may seem small and or that there's no reason for it, but like inside it's actually this really big deep thing that you may not even know the reasons why at the beginning of the separation, but you discover why you were meant to separate. Um so I did not separate because I hated my husband. He's still one of my best friends. I have wonderful conversations with him. Always have had wonderful conversations with him. He's a very kind, loving human. And, I'm never going to say anything bad about him. I mean, I made him pick of you. And there's things that obviously don't align with who I am, but he's a great, wonderful human. And, he's the father of my children. There's two. He's the father of my children. And, I want to have a good relationship with him going forward. So that's kind of the foundation of where I came from. I'm sure there's more questions in there, but
I have so many.
yeah.
Like last time, I have so many. The first one that comes to mind is not actually about you and your husband, but more about your bisexuality. And I'm curious how it felt to truly step into that label and embrace it and know, like, okay, I'm that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Okay. So what's I when I separated, I kept my whole sexual adventurous awakening completely quiet from him because it was like I was discovering this for myself
Right.
and he was over here and I was like, I don't even know who this person is, right? So how do you talk to someone about something
Mm,
that you don't even know yourself, right? Um, and so my so the experience that I had was with a threesome and it the guy had stepped away to I think go get his drinks or I don't even remember why he stepped away. He had stepped away at some point in time. So her and I were talking and we ended up getting this conversation. I'm like, oh, because she was significantly younger than me. And so I was so curious, like, how does someone of that age even do this? Because like this was hard for me too, right? Um, and we just start, the conversations, how they unfold. And then I started asking him, like, do you mind me asking, like, was your dad around? Like, did you have a view? I started like asking like all these like really personal questions. I was like, because this is where I came from. And she's like, no, I didn't have any of that. She's like, I just am bisexual. And I was like,
What? Yeah.
you can just be bisexual. Like there doesn't have to be a reason to be bisexual.
Oh,
And it was like
that's
just this
beautiful.
aha moment and like literally years of
Oh,
like shame and guilt and
yeah.
just,
You had
you know,
permission because she'd
oh
given herself permission,
yeah.
right?
And so which actually that kind of ties actually into the conscious parenting. I'll explain in a minute. So
Okay.
because I had this conversation, like this very vulnerable conversation and open conversation about something that maybe other people don't see to be a good thing or is taboo or out there, or just not talked about,
Mhm.
right? Necessarily, it gave me permission to be myself. And
Mm.
so, what's interesting about the conscious uncoupling and parenting is the more I talk about it, the more I have had people be like, oh, I do that too. Oh, I do that too, but I don't have anyone to talk to about it.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
And so I I kind of I've been very in general, I'm not a closed book, right?
Right.
This part about being bisexual was just like that was like a really shameful, like to me, it was a shameful thing because I had this belief it was shameful, right? So therefore
Mm.
I didn't speak about something that was shameful. But other things about myself that I wasn't shameful of and accepted, I definitely was open about. So I find that there's a lot of things that people have going on in their lives
Mm.
that they don't talk about. And it's so interesting with the parenting, the co-parenting, people are so used to complaining about their exes.
Yes.
Like it's like that's the norm. The norm is to like bash your ex. And so when you're one of those people who actually still loves and respects their ex,
Yeah.
you feel weird kind of speaking up when everyone's bashing their ex, right? And so it took a lot to just, I mean, and the truth is I'm never going to say anything bad about him really around other people. And, to my friends, as I said, that's a little different. Like we all have our complaints. But I just in general, I'm never going to say anything bad about him because he's a good human. Like, why would I bash him
Mm.
just because he's my ex? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for answering the bisexual question because I recently had a moment like that where on all my profiles it says, 39, bi curious, and I've
Mhm.
had a few experiences with women, but they weren't like enough that I was like, yes, like I crave women. It's like, okay, I'll have a threesome with my partner. And recently we had an experience where I was like, oh no, I like this. like, like I could have this without him even, and I would like this. And I remember having this moment where I looked at Scott. She had gone. Like this wasn't weird in front of her, but I had looked
Yeah.
at Scott and I was like, dude, I'm bisexual. Like I can take the curious part now out of my labeling and I can fully step into this bisexuality. And I know that that is not what this podcast is about, but I was curious as you mentioned it in your journey,
Yeah.
if that moment for you was as big and bold and important as the moment was for me.
It was huge. It's huge. It's like a whole realization about yourself, like who you are as a person, how you show up in the world. So to me, it was huge.
I
That
love that.
threesome. I have like some very defining moments in my life during threesomes.
Like other than them being fun, I'm also getting downloads. It's great. Thank you, universe. Um, so let me move more into the mechanics of this
Yeah.
because people that are listening are probably like, what the fuck? How in the world would you want to live with your ex-husband? And so maybe walk us through how that happened. Was he out the gate like, yeah, Wendy, great idea. Let's keep living together? Or was he like, you're fucking crazy. I don't want to be married to you. Or like, I don't want to still live with you. And if we're not going to be married, or like, how does that conversation even happen? Walk
So
us through that.
yeah, so like, it's not like just a one thing. And this is something that I I credit my friends who have had messy divorces
Mhm.
um,
Because you're
for
like, I don't want
helping
that.
exactly
Yeah.
because I knew I didn't want that. Like I
Yeah.
knew that like this is not the road I want to go down at all. And I'm very fortunate that my best friend, she separated from her husband with no animosity. And in fact, I'm the person who served his
Mm.
papers because you have to serve like there has to be that like legal serving of papers to for the divorce, right? And I watched as like literally I was like the person that was like there as they're signing their papers together, like here's the document, here,
Yeah.
right? Like um and so I saw that like it doesn't have to be hard. Now she also had she that was her not her first marriage. And so her first marriage was not quite that easy because she also
Yeah.
learned, right? And so of course I've had some friends with crazy, crazy dramatic things. And honestly, I'll have to say that part of the reason the uncoupling began was because once I started realizing I was building up resentment towards my husband, I knew that something like it had to something had to start happening now before it
Mhm.
became anger and frustration and that animosity, right? Because resentment comes first. And so our whole process of even separating was not like a just a we're gonna separate. It was a talking and it was get unfortunately I kind of went on my own personal journey without him because that's all I knew, right? Like work on
Mhm.
yourself,
Mhm.
right? Like those are the messages you get if you're unhappy, work on yourself.
Mhm.
And especially like as women, I think there's this messages all the time that we have to do everything on our own and
Yeah.
like be
You
the
don't need a
better
man.
person, right? Or yeah, it's just like you have to be the better person. Like you have to if there's a problem with the relationship, it's on you to fix it. Like I cannot tell you how many women I come across, myself included, where like we got that message where
Mhm.
all the men are just boys will be boys, right? So it's up to us to fix everything, right? So I kind of went, and I had mentioned I was unhappy. So I want to do want to put this out there. Like I had talked about him, I was unhappy, but I'm not that person that's going to be like, so unhappy right now. You have to change what you're doing. Like because that's not the framework, right? It was more about like, well, he's going to be who he is, so I have to fix myself so I can fit back into our marriage,
Mhm.
right?
Which I'm sure you did
And
for years.
I did for years and years, and
Because
so
we all
I
do,
kept.
and we try, right? That's part of the like the trying to make it work and the going to
Mhm.
therapy and the doing all the things and seeing if you can band-aid and like maybe pour some glue on it so it'll stay together. And
Yeah,
eventually you pop out of the box because you can't fit in there anymore.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted out before he knew how much I really wanted out. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? And so I realized there needed to be multiple conversations to to get him up to speed to where I was. Like just laying it all out and like I'm done and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Like what? I mean, like we all know people who have been through that. Like either side of the situation. I mean, I've had people just like break up with me before, and you're like, what did
Yeah.
I do?
We didn't
Right?
even talk about this. Hang on.
Yeah. And in their mind, they're giving tons of clues and suggestions and all that stuff. So I did make it I wanted to make sure like it was actual conversations about this is how unhappy I am. But I didn't want to give him like a guidebook. This is what you need to do to change yourself to make me happy. Because that's not I did that for
Right.
him too, and that doesn't work. So it was that realization that we needed to uncouple. So with that uncoupling, from the moment where we knew that it was no longer going to work for us as a marriage, like the next sentence was how do we make this the easiest for the kids and how do we
Mm.
want this to be a learning and growing experience for them. And in my it in the moment the, the biggest gift I thought I could give my kids was to show them an example of how to break up without like burning the house down, right?
Yes.
Because both my husband and I, we both had situations where like you're like, you break up and that's it. And right. You know,
And they're no longer in your life and they're not allowed to come
right.
over for Christmas. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole animosity and the things that we had seen that didn't work in other people's separations, right? And we knew
Yeah.
we didn't want to do that because we knew we are a family, we are a family, right?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't go away just because the relationship is no longer there. And so we they were still pretty young at the time, so we were like, we're going to live together for a while
Mm.
until it's comfortable for the kids.
Mm.
Like it was not about us. It was not about like they didn't, I mean, whether or not you choose your parents or not, like is irrelevant. So let's just say, like, in this moment right now on earth,
Yeah.
they did not choose us as parents. We brought them in,
Yeah.
right? And so they don't have any control over the situation. So it is our duty, our responsibility to keep giving them a caring, loving home that's supportive.
Okay.
And the way we do that is to work together to create that for them. So, so it was uncomfortable at first, obviously, but honestly, there have been many there have been many nights where we were not sleeping together anyway up to that point.
Yeah.
So he spent the vast majority, he kind of agreed, like, all right, I'm no longer coming back to the bedroom. I'm going to be out in the living room. But the truth is, there was still weird because it's like, he's here, but he's not here. He's not here. He's
Mm.
not here. And we did take a year of separation where he moved out. And the truth is, it's hard. Like economically, it was hard. Like supportively, it was hard. Like
Mm.
all of the things about it were really hard. And there was a day like when his rental agreement was coming up.
Mhm.
I was like, we're sharing finances. You're here all because he was still here all the time, like because we still were trying to create the best supportive environment, right? So he would literally come over for breakfast every day he could and dinner every day he could
Wow.
because that way he could still see his kids, right? And the weekends we've never been like I have him this day, you have him that
Yeah.
day. It's just more like what's going on in our lives and what do you want to you know? And that's kind of what we did. So when his rental agreement was coming up, I was like, hey, before you renew, what do you think about moving back in? I'm like, you're here. It would be much easier financially. But instead of moving into the couch, why don't you take one room? Because we're only in a 2 bedroom. So why don't you take one room with one son and I'll be in the other room with the other son? And
Mhm.
that way it's it's like fair, but also like kids get to have their parents. And obviously if we had, more rooms, we would do it a
Mhm.
little differently than that. But this is how we did it with the 2 bedroom, right? And that's what we did. And it's been a few years now and it works. And so it's, I treat him with respect. He treats me with respect. And I don't know, like I don't to me it's not hard.
That's awesome. I have a lot of questions. Can I start
Okay.
asking? Are you okay with that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
don't want to break your train of thought. The first one is like, who gave you permission to do it differently? Because I think a lot of people feel that way, right? They're like, why would I do anything differently? This is the way society does it. This is the way everybody does it. And I think it's a big deal to go against the grain in such a way that you're living, especially once you have other partners too, right? So what gave you permission to do this? Did you give yourself permission? Did your friends? Like, how did that work?
Um, you know what? It's funny you say that, like, but it never occurred to me
That
to
you
worry
need?
about
I love
what
that.
I needed. It was just what the kids needed,
Yeah,
what
I
the
love that.
family unit needed, what like works for everybody. Like it wasn't that I was like being like selflessly like putting my needs aside. Like I asked him back in because it was harder for me, him
Yes.
not having the support I needed, right? So it's not even a matter of, like it's not like I'm the selfless person,
Yeah. You're like,
right? But it
this
was like
works best for us. It's economical. Why would you not do that? Which feels really
exactly
clear to me. Okay, so my next question is, did you guys have conversations around polyamory? Because obviously it was opposite, right? He was very
right.
monogamous, and you were like, I need to have this other thing in my life. And the reason I'm sure you have, but the reason I'm asking you to talk about it is because I right now have several people that I know, either clients that I have or friends that I have, that are in the exact situation that you and your husband or husband
Yeah.
were in. And they're trying to figure out how to navigate this. So I think hearing a bit from you about, yeah, we had these
Yeah.
difficult conversations and we could not move past them, or we tried it and he hated it. And so we ended up breaking up, or what did that look like?
So this is where it's, I don't necessarily know that I agree necessarily with the way I did it. I just, because there weren't any models,
Yeah.
right? So I was going through, but also it was the understanding. I separated with him not because he wasn't polyamorous, right? Like that wasn't the issue. I separated with him because I was not happy in this relationship. I knew it was related to monogamy,
Mhm.
and I was never going to ask him to be anything other than who he is, right? So we have a bit of a don't ask, don't tell policy around here because he is very uncomfortable talking about this stuff. And just because I'm comfortable talking about it doesn't mean I'm like, now I'm right and I have to force him to be a way that he is not.
Mhm.
And there's other things, like it's an understanding of where we both are in different places. The door is always open for the conversations,
Mhm.
right? But I am not going to force someone. Also, part of it too is it's not who he is. Like he is not polyamorous and he is not bisexual. Our conversations around threesomes was like, yeah, no. Like that, why would I force someone to do something or
Mhm.
like guilt them into it? Like that didn't feel right. That's why I said it's a part of the separation because that is who I am and that is a part of who I am. And I don't like for me personally, I don't think anyone needs to be a certain way other than who they authentically are.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going to be like, oh, you're not polyamorous. Oh my God, you won't give me a threesome. Like, okay, this is where we're at. Like, is this who I am? Or is this just something I'm trying or interested in? And it's the realization. And as I said, part of it was because a lot of this became a realization later. I just knew I was unhappy. So it's hard to say like,
Mm.
oh, I wasn't here when I separated,
Got
right?
it.
I was still trying to
You're like, I'm
understand who
unhappy,
I
but I'm
was.
not sure why. I
Yeah.
know this needs to happen. And then as you broke away and you started to kind of investigate what
Yes.
your sexual needs were, what you wanted, and so then you were like, okay, this is it. This all
Right.
makes sense back to being 6 and all my boyfriends breaking up with me.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I knew he wasn't interested in exploring this,
Yeah.
right? So it was like, okay, where am I?
Yeah.
But I do think the conscious uncoupling part was kind of an essential component
Hmm.
to my growth. I don't know. I mean, I also chose well. Like I chose a good guy. Does that
Oh,
make
I love
sense?
that.
Right? So like he's a good person. So he's a person I want to have in my life. He's a person that I'm glad he's around here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, how does it work for the two of you when you're dating other people? Because you're
So
not married. So, I'm sure he's like seeing people, you're seeing people. Like, how does that work?
so it is like this place is for home.
It's sacred
And
and they
yeah,
don't come here. Okay.
nope. Neither neither one of us like we do everything out. And so when I'm meeting new people, I'm like, this is the way it is. And like if that's an
Yeah.
issue, that's
You can't
like
come to my place.
it's a deal
Okay.
breaker. Cause
You
like,
have an available space for me to come to, right?
yeah, exactly. Because my family is sacred to me,
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
And so it's not about, and as the kids get older, as things will change, right? But
Yep.
right now, in this moment, we have a family life. My my younger son, he's got a brain injury, so I don't know how much things he understands or doesn't understand. My older son's 13. He knows I date other people. Like it's not like I hide things from him. He knows that we're separated,
Mhm.
right? Like like there's not a it's not that's why I said like everything is available to be open. It's
Mhm.
just, why harp in on something that is the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was going to be my other question is like, how involved are the kids are in knowing all the dynamics of all of this? Like, did they just see mom and dad live at home and mom and dad have separate bedrooms? Are they like, does your oldest one specifically, is he clear that like they're divorced, but they're co-parenting us? And I really appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, very much so.
'Cause,
So he knows I'm bisexual. He
mhm,
knows that I have date with girls and I have dates with guys. Haven't really gotten into the whole like sex people like swinging
yeah,
aspect because that's like not where
right.
right
He's a little too young.
conversation yet, but
Right.
like I'm definitely more of the like as he knows he can talk to me about things because we do have an open conversation. So he used to ask me some like really taboo about some taboo topics, and I talk to him as a knowledgeable, grounded 13-year-old boy would, but I'm not going to talk to him like he's a 40-year-old person, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, one of the questions that I get typically from clients or people that are interested in this conscious uncoupling conversation, especially when we're talking about parents moving out or even parents staying together in the same house but being divorced, the person going through this process is terrified that they're going to fuck their kids up forever, right? I'm sure you felt that way. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you didn't. I didn't really feel that way with my kids. I was like, they're going to be fine. But a lot of people are really, they're stuck there. They're like, I can't make another move because I don't want to mess my kids up. I don't want to tear my family apart. I don't want to, so like I'm stuck and I'm immobile and I'm like in quicksand and I can't move. Do you have any feedback on how this process has affected the kids, especially since you have stayed in the same house?
All right. So I'm going to go to some advice that a friend gave me
Yep.
when I was wobbling on whether or not I even wanted to have the conversation of separation, right? And she asked me, what advice would you give my son if he was feeling the way you're feeling?
Mhm.
And I started crying because I was like, I would never want my kid to be as unhappy and uncertain and scared and just not willing to live their life, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think like that's always stuck with me. So a lot of times the decisions I make from that point forward have always been about what are the messages, the gifts, the understanding that I want to give my kids. And as I said, I wanted to show them you can break up with someone without burning the house down. Like you can separate with grace. You don't have to separate with anger. I wanted to show them that you can live with someone, even if they sometimes, you know, get you annoyed, right? That you can be angry with someone. It doesn't mean you hold it against them. Even, just parenting in general is about showing them that you can have emotions, you can have big emotions, and they will pass and they will move through. And so as uncomfortable as all some of these conversations have been with my son, they're important for him. And I see how over the years they start playing out. Like when it comes to the dating and being who I am and not being scared of that, he is more willing to be who he is because
Love
he sees me being more willing to be who I am. He sees me being accepting of his dad, even though he's not the person that I want to be with, but I still love him and care for him as a person. The strengths and weaknesses of all parties in this house are often pointed out, right? Like the weaknesses are usually pointed out, right? But we also always follow up with like the strengths, right? Um, so that's more about this. So like if you're staying and you're scared and you're not being who you are, is that the life you want for your kids? And I don't think most parents want that for their kids. Most parents want their kids to be comfortable in their body, to be comfortable with who they am, live, having dreams going for them and probably failing and making mistakes along the way. But like just getting back up and just continuing to live and experience life.
Mm, I love that. And a couple things popped into my head as you've been talking. And one is, you and I aren't encouraging people to stay with abusive partners. If you have a partner that you just are no longer sexually compatible with, which is probably its own thing that Wendy can help you with. But if there's things where you're like, we just can't work this out, but we love our children and we love our family unit and we want to stay together in some way, this is a great option. But if your partner is abusive to you in any way, mentally, physically, verbally, gaslighting, manipulating, like this is not a solution for you.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, as I said, I I have a good co-parent, right?
Yes, exactly. I just want to clarify that for anyone
Yeah.
listening that's like, I'm really trying. And I'm like, if
Yeah.
they're being all those other things, you don't want to co-parent with them in the same house, at least. That's a terrible idea. I'm curious, how do your partners feel about you still living with your ex? Has that ever brought up any weird feelings, crunchiness, animosity? How do you explain it to
Yeah.
them in a way that helps?
Well, first off, anyone who wants to be with me has to accept that, right?
Mhm.
So there is a level of like, okay, this will be fun for, like, because a new partner or whatever, oh, this will be fun. And then as they get to know me and they're like, oh wow, okay, hey, this is the way it is. Like, and they make it work. And,
Yeah.
I talk openly about, I'm like, oh, I can't, I've got, got something going on, or they've got something going on,
Mhm.
right? Whatever it is. And um, I think on any polyamorous, anytime you have more than one person in your life, it doesn't even have to be like polyamory romantic, right? If you have someone in your life who have kids, they have their own lives. They have
Mhm.
their things that they need to do, like whether it's practice or a hobby or going out with friends, and you guys coordinate and readjust. You don't go, oh my God, how dare you want to go to the movies with your friends, right? But I think there's an importance sometimes that people put on romantic relationships that I think is unfair. It's societal conditioning where our romantic partner is supposed to like fulfill us and make us complete and whole. And instead of, I look more at my partners as a complementary addition to my life,
Mhm.
and I'm never looking for anyone to make me whole as a person.
Perfect. I love that. This feels like a good stopping point. Is there anything else that you want to add that you would encourage someone in a situation similar to yours or mine that knows that they need to separate from their partner, but they're in a loving relationship? It's just not working for them. Any last advice that you would give them to take the steps to have a conscious uncoupling and to consider continuing to kind of live in the same space and co-parent together?
This is something that whenever I work with anyone in any realm,
Mhm.
actually, of anything, I'm a big believer because I see how important it is to kind of get clear on what your ideal vision of what you want is. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to know the answers or the path on how to make it happen. But once you get clear on like the big pieces of it, right? I knew I wanted to separate from my husband. I knew I didn't want to destroy the family. I knew that we didn't have, in this exact moment, we didn't have the finances, just, go move into like, a mansion and have like a whole bunch of space, right? But so it's like, what do I want? I was like, I want to have a good, open line of communication, like get really clear on what it is, knowing that I want to put the kids first. I want to make sure that they feel supported during this, that I'm not losing myself in this process, that I'm allowing space for me, allowing space for them. How, what is that? And then the answers kind of start unfolding, because everyone's path is going to be different. Everyone's, strengths and weaknesses are different. And so when you get clear about what you're trying to create, like, the path will open up for you to create it. But you just have to be brave enough to love yourself enough to want to create a better life.
I love that. And don't be afraid to be the visionary for your family in this, because truthfully, I'm assuming a lot of women are going to be listening to this. I have noticed it's usually the women that are leading this conversation and this vision and holding it for your family. And don't be afraid to be the one to be the visionary and to be the leader in this. I have found that the men that I have divorced have been ecstatically happy to still be involved. And they just needed kind of like a little bit of a guide of like, what does that look like? Oh, the boys have baseball games this season. Here's their schedule. If you want to pop in and come see a game, we'd love to see you. It's that easy.
Yeah. I want to share something that just popped into my head because I think it's really, it might be really useful for someone that's listening to this particular conversation. So my best friend who also, consciously uncoupled, and how I consciously uncoupled, we were at, I think, with a bunch of women all complaining, right, about their spouses, a bunch of them going through divorces. And there was this one woman who was going through a divorce, and the attorneys had gotten involved, and it was becoming this big, huge thing. And my best friend and I took her aside. We're like, we want to ask you a question. We've known you now for a little bit. We have never known your husband to want to take advantage of you. Has he ever really tried to take advantage of you? And she's like, no, no. Like, why do you think he's trying to do that now? Like, is there a way that you could just talk to him, knowing who he is as a person, and see if you can figure some things out? Like, it doesn't, just talk to them. Like, just talk to the person as the person that you know and you fell in love with, because they're still there. They're still that person. And I think that's the biggest part, is like, it's not you having to, there is that vision, right, of you creating it, but it's also about like inviting them in with love and integrity.
Feels so good inside. Wendy, thank you so much for transparently and consciously entering into this conversation. You were very bold because you didn't have any idea what I was going to ask you today, but you met me with every single question. So thank you for this. And thank you for being a light for other people that want to create a new paradigm for their families. And I love that we get to continue to shine light on what it can look like, and hopefully more women come to both of us with their stories, and we can continue to share.
Yeah.
Share some light. All right. Thank you, lady. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below, and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends, and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.